Welcome once again to Cinemaholics. From Kansas City, I'm Abby Olchesi. I'm a freelance writer and film editor for The Pitch magazine. And from New York, our guest this week, she's a freelance writer with bylines at the LA Times, The Playlist, and Crooked Marquee. And Kimber, feel free to let me know if there are more that I'm not mentioning. It's Kimber Myers.
Hey there. No, that is a perfect rundown of where I can be found on the internet.
Awesome. And the irony and fun this week is that, Kimber, both of the movies that we are discussing, Palmer and The Little Things, are movies that we both reviewed for Crooked Marquee this week. So if you want to find out our further thoughts beyond our discussion this week, you can go to Crooked Marquee and find out in great detail both what we thought of what I thought of Palmer and what Kimber thought of The Little Things, as well as a really nice essay by Roxana Haddadi about the kind of career trajectory of John Lee Hancock, the writer and director of The Little Things. So if January movies are a thing you're really excited about, there's all kinds of cool content over on that website that you can check out. All right, so you can find more episodes of Cinemaholics, including our full archive, on cinemaholics.com, including written reviews. You can write into the show anytime by emailing us at cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. And you can support us directly by becoming one of our monthly patrons on patreon.com/cinemaholics. So as you've probably noticed, neither John nor Will are present this week. Both of them are, quote unquote, at Sundance this week, checking out movies and writing up reviews from the online edition of that festival. I've been seeing some pretty promising movies in that lineup that I am excited to hear them talk about a little bit more when we get back to our kind of regularly scheduled programming format, I think next weekend. And yeah, digital fests are kind of, I don't know, they can be kind of a hodgepodge. Sometimes the experience goes well, sometimes it doesn't. I've been hearing some pretty nice things about the format that Sundance has used. It sounds like it's moving pretty smoothly. Kimber, have you had any experience doing online festivals in the last year or so, like pandemic-wise?
Yeah, so I watched my first movie for Sundance last night, and their setup, I think, is really, really easy, which was lovely. And then last fall, I watched some films from the New York Film Festival, and then the Hamptons, I think, were the two, and maybe Montclair. So I stayed local, even though I probably could have obviously ventured further afield for some of those. How about you?
Yeah, that's great. I've done a little bit of online film festing, and I will be doing again later this year for South by Southwest. Last year, I think the most experience I had with that was not Fantastic Fest, Fantasia. They have such similar names, it could be easy to get them confused. But yeah, I did some viewing and reviewing for Fantasia last fall. Which is cool because that's a festival that I've never been able to go to before. The last couple of years I've gone to Toronto, and usually Fantasia falls like right on the heels of that. I think Fantastic Fest does too. And so it can be kind of hard for me because I have a day job to wrangle that much vacation time. But yeah, this was kind of a nice change. I got to catch up with some really cool indie horror movies. And yeah, I'm hoping that South by's setup is as seamless and helpful as Sundance's seems to be. What have you seen for Sundance so far, Kimber? Anything that you can share that's not embargoed?
Yeah, so last night I watched one, and I know I'm going to flip the title. It's either Ma Belle, My Beauty, or My Beauty, Ma Belle, which was recommended in our Crooked Marquee editor, Jason Bailey. He did a pre-fest roundup at the New York Times. And this was one that he recommended as, if you like Call Me By Your Name, this would be a good option. And it's set in the south of France. The setting is really, really lovely. And it definitely hits at a lot of things that are at least missing in my life right now, because I'm not traveling to the south of France and I'm not having lovely lingering dinner parties with people and things like that. I didn't love it overall, but that mood really, really got me. What have you seen so far that you can talk about?
I haven't seen any Sundance films so far yet. I've been busy with a bunch of other projects that have unfortunately kind of overlapped. But I've been really excited to see some positive reviews for stuff that I was looking forward to watching, like Passing. I saw that had a premiere and got some pretty successful reviews, which is good. I mean, I feel like Rebecca Hall directing that particular movie could feel like a gamble potentially. So it's nice to see that has paid off some. I think Mass was another one that I was sort of curious about, being a pretty big Joss Whedon and Cabin in the Woods fan, seeing Fran Kranz getting to like write and direct a movie and have it be something that I would not have expected this person to make. I've been hearing really great things about that too. So that's another one that I'm looking forward to seeing soon.
Yeah, there's always so much to keep track of. I know I've got a couple windows on Tuesday, including one for a film called Jockey, which stars Clifton Collins Jr. and is, full disclosure, produced by kind of a friend of a friend, Nancy Schaefer, and it just got bought yesterday by Sony Pictures Classic. So I'm even more excited. I've heard great things, and I feel like Clifton Collins Jr. is one of those people who I'm always excited to see. And we'll see about this one. I'm definitely intrigued.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been hearing really good things about that too, and I also enjoy watching Clifton Collins Jr. in things. And my favorite member of the Vegan Police Squad, seeing him in a lead role, I think sounds pretty cool. I love it when a character actor gets to do something that lets them stretch a little bit.
Yeah, it's always great.
Awesome. So I think we don't have a listener voicemail this week. But I guess the discussion is kind of ongoing. John and Will discussed News of the World last week, and the question that they had some responses to was, what is the best Tom Hanks performance? I feel like this is one that we can probably both weigh in on, right? That's he's had such a long and great career, and as somebody who enjoyed News of the World, I thought he was very well cast in that. Kimber, do you have any thoughts on favorite Tom Hanks performances or Tom Hanks overall?
Oh, man. So definitely, I thought he was great in News of the World. Was really, really impressed by that performance. And the film in general, I thought was pretty great. I do love him. I mean, he is obviously so great in dramatic roles, but the ones that I really love the most, I think, are the comedic ones, like the Bigs. And I love seeing him kind of play against type in A League of Their Own. And for any Tom Hanks fans, and also just fans of great writing, and I wish I could remember the name of the piece, but Anne Patchett, who wrote Bel Canto and a number of other wonderful both fiction and nonfiction books, just published a piece about her friendship with Tom Hanks' assistant that is a real long read, but is one of the loveliest, most human things I've read recently. It's definitely definition of long online read, but it's a good half hour or so, but it's a wonderful world to live in, and I highly recommend it. And I wish I could remember the name of it, but if you Google, I imagine, Anne Patchett and Tom Hanks, it'll come up real quick.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds like a lovely place to spend a half an hour with good writing about an interesting subject. And I hope that Tom Hanks comes off as nice as he seems. I imagine that it would be kind of a nice gig being Tom Hanks' assistant, being the assistant to America's dad.
Oh, absolutely. That is one of the nice things, is it definitely does not burst that bubble that we all definitely have around, is Tom Hanks a good person? And the answer continues to be yes. So yeah.
Oh, thank God for that.
You're good.
Good. 2021 continues to just kind of dance around the edge of things that could possibly be bad, but it sounds like this one turns out to be good, so that's nice. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Kimber. I appreciate the Hanks comedic roles, I think, a little more than the dramatic roles, although he's often great in just about anything he's in. Yeah, personally, I'm a sucker for You've Got Mail. I have been since I was a kid and enjoyed watching that in the theater. So I think that's probably my personal favorite Tom Hanks performance, alongside Woody from Toy Story, obviously, because that was another sort of iconic moment in my own childhood. So those are my Hanks highlights.
So good. Can't go wrong with either of those.
Absolutely. And before we kind of get into our main reviews, I feel like we have a little bit of space to kind of pump up anything we've been watching lately that we've really enjoyed. I know John and Will talked a little bit about In and of Itself as a featured review last week, and that's one that I did get to catch up on just before its release, and one that I really enjoyed. I think it can be kind of hard to capture the energy and power of a live performance, especially one like In and of Itself, which has such interesting idiosyncrasies. But I feel like Frank Oz does a really great job of capturing what makes Derek DelGaudio's show so powerful and interesting, which of course is appropriate because I think he actually directed the stage show. So it's nice that so many of the people who actually put that thing together are involved in the filmed version of it. And I appreciate the fact that it really feels emotionally powerful, but also like a truly magical experience that leaves you with a lot of questions. And I feel like it's best not to answer those questions and to just kind of go into it and straight up enjoy the fact that you're being kind of emotionally broken down, but also just sort of astounded at the things that you're encountering. So I'm glad they got to talk about that. I haven't heard their full review of that yet, but I am looking forward to hearing more of it. Kimber, has there been anything else that's kind of been popping up on your radar lately? I know it's January, so it's a little bit of a downtime for movies, but occasionally stuff squeaks through that is notable, or like stuff that we didn't get to catch up with in December that we're finally getting around to.
Yeah, so I saw Some Kind of Heaven, which I think was reviewed on here a few weeks ago. If anyone missed that, it's a doc about this giant retirement community in Florida from a first-time director. I think his name is Lance Oppenheimer. And it is both like beautifully shot and constructed, as well as I just really appreciated the director's approach. I thought it was smart and really gave a lot of insight into this world that for many of us is a foreign thing. So I thought that was great. Less good, but still like the perfect kind of comfort food for kind of like a cozy January, or I guess now when you'll be listening to this, February, was a British film called Love, Sarah. That is, I don't want to like give it a full-throated, this is a great movie endorsement. There's in fact one moment that made me roll my eyes, to the like degree of worrying that I'd sprained something, but, it's a delightful British comedy set in an upstart bakery. And it's just, very like, no pun intended, sweet, but is definitely like a nice, like cozy watch, where if you go into it with low expectations, hopefully you'll come out of it having enjoyed it, but definitely don't watch it without like a stash of desserts, particularly baked goods around you, because it really does that well. There's some really beautiful culinary creations in there that just had me salivating. So that's kind of a like low key, if you like a British, like a cozy British comedy, this is up your alley.
Oh, excellent. That's we're kind of getting into prime, for me at least, masterpiece theater territory, where like it's sort of cold and miserable outside, and I want to spend time in a world that is not wildly challenging, but like kind of fun, occasionally exciting, allows me to kind of knit while I watch TV like an old grandma. So like that sounds like it might just fit the bill.
Yeah, it's delightful. I have few complaints.
That's good. Few complaints is, I think, a pretty decent review. That's enough, I think, to have a solid recommendation if you're looking for something to stream. Good. So let's move on into our kind of featured reviews for the week. The first of which will be The Little Things, and this is the John Lee Hancock written and directed crime thriller starring Denzel Washington and Rami Malek and Jared Leto. And Kimber, since you had the full review write-up of this on Crooked Marquee, how about you tell us a little bit about the plot and some of your initial thoughts on the film?
Yeah, so it is set in, for some reason, specifically October 1990. And Denzel Washington plays Deacon, who is a kind of disgraced former LA detective who has been, I guess, banished to Bakersfield, where he's doing very like low key police work, where we're introduced to him like in a kind of quirky, he's investigating repeated vandalism, which if you decide to watch it, I won't spoil that slight moment of giggles, but which is one of the few lighter spots for me, at least in the movie. But he is out in Bakersfield doing this very low-level police work, but he is sent back to LA to pick up some evidence from one of their cases. And while there, he gets pulled into a serial murder case that reminds him of his last case before he left Los Angeles. And Rami Malek plays Jim Baxter, who is the kind of like hotshot detective who's on the upswing of his career, and he is investigating this series of murders. And Jared Leto is I feel like it's not too much of a spoiler to say that he is a suspect. Even if you just see a picture of him, you're like, yeah, that guy looks like a serial killer. Yeah. So, and the actual crimes, it's in both sets of murders. It's women, and it is, I think in both cases, it is either sex workers or women who are kind of like on the margins. And it's a bit darker than John Lee Hancock usually goes. The director, I think, is normally known for kind of like middle of the road, like charming-ish dramas from like Saving Mr. Banks and The Rookie, things like that are more like kind of standard, like nice Hollywood fare. And this is quite a bit grimmer, both in its tone as well as in its subject matter. Yeah, that's kind of my quick rundown. I did not love it, to put it mildly. I know it's something to it. I think it's interesting to note that this was a movie that John Lee Hancock wrote back in the 90s, which explains its setting in the 90s, at least partially. And before he was directing, but instead was doing screenplays, including for people like Clint Eastwood, who was initially thinking about directing it, as was Steven Spielberg, who I think Spielberg decided that it was too dark. But so it sat for decades until now. And I think I had many problems with this movie, but one of the things is that it's not evident that it's set in 1990 by anything other than like, there are no cell phones and all the cars look like they were when I was a kid. Like there's not, I think, a lot of great period detail there, but, yeah. What did you think?
I'm in kind of a similar boat, I think, to you, Kimber. It's interesting to hear that Eastwood considered directing this at one point. I feel like it would have made a really good Clint Eastwood movie potentially. Like there's that kind of atmosphere is the kind of thing that he tends to do pretty well with, as like one of maybe a handful of people who kind of legitimately enjoys The Changeling. I feel like there's some sort of atmospheric similarities there in terms of the kind of stark darkness that is pervasive throughout this. And I also enjoy the idea of it being kind of a throwback to a period when like darker crime dramas were sort of a thing that people made and watched a lot, like usually kind of mid-budgeted, kind of big, scary crime dramas that had a little bit, like often actually starred either Denzel Washington or Morgan Freeman, funnily enough. And really, I enjoyed those when they were a thing. And it's kind of fun to have something that reminds me of movies that I did enjoy when I was, somewhat younger, like getting into like high school and college. And like stuff that I remember being on basic cable a lot. But I feel like the execution of this really is not up to the standard of those films, which, to be fair, is not a very high standard. I don't think that it actually takes that much to make a twisty crime thriller that's that effective.
No. This definitely, I think was helpful to know that it was written before like a Seven, because it feels like it borrows from Seven a bit, especially in particular scenes, and there's definitely some. It feels like it's borrowing from Silence of the Lambs, which did, I think, come out before this was written, but it feels like a retread when it predated some of the films that it seems like it could be copying. But yeah, and I don't think it doesn't seem like the script was updated at all between when it was written in the 90s and now to kind of either reflect how the genre has changed, or even to like fully lean into, oh, we're going to make this a 90s crime thriller. It felt very generic to me in a lot of ways, and was not interesting beyond just Denzel Washington's performance, which I think is very good, but I mean, he's generally very good.
Yeah, and I think it's generic and also confusing, oddly. Like there's an interesting kind of ongoing relationship between Denzel Washington's character, Joe Deacon, and Jim, the character played by Rami Malek, where there's sort of a similar level of like early talent from what we know of Denzel Washington's character's history with the LAPD, coupled with really strong potential for obsession, and watching them play off each other has moments of interest, but it really becomes, I think, especially in the third act, really confusing as to who the actual perpetrator of these crimes is. I know Leto is he's posited as the main suspect, but there's some kind of final act stuff that muddies those waters a bit in a way that I thought was kind of interesting and could have been potentially threaded out a bit more through the script to make it evident that that's a way that it could have gone. And there's some potential for some interesting kind of cat and mouse stuff between Leto and Washington and Malek, which is there, but also between Washington and Malek, which is sort of maybe hinted at and kind of revealed in a way that I found kind of fascinating in like the last shots, and wondering where was that movie the entire time. That could have been really cool. But instead, you're just sort of left with 2 hours plus of not really being sure why these characters are doing some of the things that they're doing, or why they're actually that committed to each other.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot that's missing here, and I think I wrote about in my review. I'm not sure whether it was not developed in the script or if it was left on the cutting room floor during editing, but there's like small things feel like they're glossed over and not explained, as well as like these larger relationship questions that I think really would have made for a better film. And I agree. I think that final bit works, but by that bit, the movie was done, but I was also just done. Like, I found it not a fun experience.
Yeah, and as we get into our final thoughts, I'm kind of in the, I felt that very similarly too. There was a point toward the end where I think it had been a long week and I was kind of tired anyway, but I was just sort of struggling to stick with it and being like, man, this movie's going to end soon. I know it's going to end soon, and I can stop it and I can go to bed. And I mean, I don't usually feel that way about movies that are that like, when a movie commands my attention, that is not a problem that I have. So I feel like that's kind of evident of the kind of thing that we're dealing with here. I also, in Malek's case, I think he's an odd choice to play the character that he is playing here. He's supposed to be kind of a straight-laced family man, and Rami Malek is nothing if not squirrely. And so I have a really hard time believing him as sort of a straight-laced character and watching him kind of unravel when you're presented with somebody who looks like they are in the process of unraveling all of the time. I feel like that's an odd choice that doesn't necessarily work for me. I feel like there are moments when it kind of does, but it's a weird one to get a handle on. So yeah, overall, I'm not super hot on this movie either. I would probably give it like a C- area maybe, or D+. There are some parts of it that I think show some potential, but I feel like those elements are not necessarily worth the slog that it takes to get there. How about you, Kimber?
Yeah, I think D plus was what I gave it for Crooked Marquis, and it does absolutely feel like a slog. It's longer than 2 hours, while still not being as developed as it might be. So I think it feels even longer than that. And yeah, I agree with the casting of Rami Malek being not maybe the best choice, as someone who really likes him in other roles and has found him incredibly talented. But yeah, that squirrely quality that he can't shake here does not work. I think it actually does the exact opposite if they want what they want to do. It's not, he's squirrely at points in the film where he really shouldn't be yet. And it, I think, really undercuts the larger efforts that they're making. And Jared Leto is someone that I used to really love because I, was a 90s girl, but is someone that I've liked less, especially as I hear about like his on-set shenanigans.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah. And although I did hear that in some interview, somebody asked Denzel Washington if he tried that with him, and he's like, no. So, which I kind of appreciate that he at least knows when to cut it out. But yeah, I also didn't really like Jared Leto here, even though I feel like the casting would fit, and he is definitely, there's a real like ickiness to his character, but it felt very labored to me in a way that I don't want that to come across. So yeah, I think I would settle on a D plus. I think too, the other thing that is important to talk about is how this movie treats women. I think that you could so there are a few kind of side characters that are women in the film. There's a coroner who's a woman, and then one of the other detectives is a woman. But most of the prominent women within the film are the victims, who are seen dead, seen mutilated, seen naked, and as a minor spoiler, like the only woman really active or one of the two women active in the case, makes a really big screw up. And I don't feel like there was any sort of thinking from John Lee Hancock around this or any of the other creative members of the team. It doesn't seem to be commenting on the lack of women or the place of women in this sort of world. And instead, it just is this forgotten thing. And they're like, whoops, accidentally, all of our women in this movie are either dead or screwing up. So...
Yeah, and that's, I think, something that sort of speaks to your earlier comment about the fact that it feels odd that the script hasn't been really updated in any way to kind of take into account, like, changing attitudes or changing stuff within that genre. So yeah, you're left with some weird victimization and occasional like kind of out and out Aaron Sorkin style goofballs where the women who are in some kind of position of like skilled ability or power of some kind, are just there to either compromise that position to men who need them to do something for them, or just make an utter gaffe of the responsibility that they're given. So yeah, I think we're sort of on the same page. I am C minus D plus territory. Kimber is solidly D plus on this. If you do want to watch The Little Things, it is currently streaming on HBO Max as part of their deal with Warner Brothers, where films are getting released simultaneously to theaters and on the streaming platform. So that is available currently, if that's where you go to get your movies. Our next review is a movie that is streaming on Apple TV Plus currently. It is the Fisher-Stevens directed, Justin Timberlake starring Palmer, which is a domestic kind of, I guess you could say socially conscious domestic drama set in rural Louisiana. Justin Timberlake plays the titular Eddie Palmer, who has recently been released from jail after a 12-month stint for attempted murder. He comes back to his hometown to live with his grandmother, played by June Squibb, and she has a couple of neighbors who live in a trailer next door. There's a single mother played by Juno Temple. And so she has a couple of neighbors who live in a trailer next door. There's a single mother who is played by Juno Temple. Her name is Shelley. And Shelley has a young son named Sam, played by Ryder Allen, who is elementary school aged. And Sam is, he displays a lot of evidence of being genderqueer. He wears, enjoys wearing dresses, likes watching girls' TV shows and playing with dolls. Something that is completely foreign to Palmer and something that he doesn't really know how to deal with. But he has to, because eventually Shelley disappears and Sam kind of comes to live with Palmer and his grandmother Vivian for a little while his mom is AWOL, which apparently is not an uncommon thing. It happens a lot. So in Sam's living with Palmer and Vivian, Palmer, Justin Timberlake's character, kind of comes to form a bond with Sam and become kind of protective over him. And in the middle of that is trying to kind of help Sam operate in the world, and also his worldview toward his understanding of Sam and loving him and accepting who he is changing as well. In addition to kind of building relationships with people around him, including Sam's teacher Maggie, played by Alicia Wainwright. So yeah, that's kind of the plot that we're dealing with Palmer. I think this is a movie that I thought was fine. It's definitely, I enjoyed it better than The Little Things say. There are parts of it that I think work better than others. I think the relationship between Timberlake and Ryder Allen is really, really sweet. I think they do have some genuine chemistry there. But Kimber, I'm curious to hear what you thought of it. What are your initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm maybe a little bit warmer on it than you are, but I do agree that the best parts are the interaction between Timberlake and Ryder Allen. I think I kind of go back and forth on Justin Timberlake as an actor. I think there are some really nice, just small, almost fractions of a second moments where he is perfect here. There's just a look or a movement that I think works so well. And they're really great together. And Ryder Allen is adorable.
He's so cute in this.
It's a very winning performance. And it's very sweet and guileless. And I really, really like that bit. There are definitely things that bother me here. And I do think that this is not the most original of films, although I think it does take a slightly different slant on the tropes that we've seen previously. But yeah, I thought that it was very watchable. And yeah, it might have been coming off of The Little Things, which was just so grim and poorly made, where I was presented with something that is I think capably fashioned in a lot of ways, but also just so well-intentioned and earnest in a way that managed not to grate.
Yeah, I would agree that well-intentioned, I think, is a good way to describe Palmer. I feel like its heart is definitely in the right place. I don't think it really takes many huge missteps in its representation of Sam and his genderqueer identity. I feel like it's very open and loving and accepting. And I think it's important to note that Sam doesn't need to change for anybody. It is Palmer, in fact, who changes, which is great. That's exactly what that narrative should be. I think there are some elements of it that work a little less well for me. I think Timberlake is really solid as sort of a small town guy who's trying to rebuild his reputation, but is in a small town where everybody knows who he is and what his past is, and he can't really escape it. I think he's really good in that role. And I feel like we don't really see Justin Timberlake in roles like this all that often, but he's pretty good in it. I would be fine with seeing him do more stuff like this. I think, yeah, he's good in it. June Squibb is good in it, although I don't think she's in it enough necessarily. The issues that I kind of have with it come with its sort of turn that it takes into kind of guardianship and like social services territory. I think Juno Temple's character Shelley is she's portrayed as like exactly the kind of character that you would expect, I think, in a movie like this. Her performance is very one note, very screamy, very loud and brash. And I feel like, not to say that that this character necessarily deserves a ton of charity, but I feel like she deserves a little more than she gets here. I feel like that part of the plot kind of gets a little bit treacly and cliched. But I mean, fortunately, that's just one part of the movie, and I think the other parts that are there work just fine. It's not necessarily a wildly creative take on the story, but I think it's, like you said, Kimber, I feel like its heart is in the right place. And like for folks who are looking for something that is a little more familiar with notes that they can kind of recognize, I feel like the genderqueer element of this is enough of a difference for that it could be kind of construed as like a potentially eye-opening moment for some viewers, which is, I mean, I feel like that's great. I'm all for that.
Yeah, like it's something that I would love to recommend to my parents if they can ever get their Apple TV Plus figured out. But yeah, I think that there's something here that is progressive while not being threatening. And I think especially with the potential audience that it has, I think that there is some power there. And I agree, I was not won over by Juno Temple's performance. And normally I think she's great, especially having just finished Ted Lasso, where she is one of the best parts of a great cast. I also, like you, took some issue with some of the like social services and guardianship questions. And there's, I think, some stuff that is not entirely believable around the relationship between Palmer and Miss Maddie, the teacher. Although I did really like Alicia Wainwright in the role. I thought she was great. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff here that contributes to the film as being like fine to like, all right, but not, again, not a full-throated recommendation, but certainly better than the other film we're talking about here.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, as we get into kind of final thoughts, when I wrote this up on Crooked Marquee, I was a C+. I'd say like I'm within that range, kind of a high C+, low B- on this. It's pretty much middle of the road, but yeah, if you're looking for kind of a meat and potatoes flick, or if you like are looking to recommend something with a slightly more progressive bent to folks who might not otherwise be looking for that kind of content, I feel like this is something that won't necessarily wildly offend people and might potentially kind of worm its way into their hearts a little bit, which, if that's the case, that's fine. But yeah, I agree with you on the relationship between Palmer and Miss Maggie, that it's not, I feel like she could do a lot better than him, which is not to be mean to Palmer, but it's just, the woman's got an education degree, and like she's clearly pretty enlightened and intelligent, living in a town that doesn't appreciate those things. And I just, there are parts of it where I was just like, I understand what you're trying to do, but girl, get away, run far.
Yeah, I'm like, the fact too that like there doesn't seem to be much attention paid to the fact, like, I don't know the particular rules of their school district, but I'm betting that it is frowned upon for a teacher to be in a romantic relationship with a child's guardian. And that's like, there's not much attention paid to that. Like, it's kind of glossed over. And like, I know that they can't address everything in a film that's an hour and 50 minutes, but it just, it did not feel necessary to me. I appreciated that having this relationship for Palmer was important and kind of getting back into who he was. But I don't think that she was necessarily the right person for that. The other thing, though, that I really did like about Timberlake's performance is I feel like he's usually like a bigger character who talks a lot and like thinking about like other roles that he's played. And this is largely, it's a much quieter role. There's less dialogue. A lot of what he does is nonverbal, which he's not an actor before this, where I would have said that was one of his strengths. But I was impressed.
Yeah, I would agree. He's pretty stoic through a lot of this, and that's something that's kind of new territory for him, and I feel like that could be an interesting way to see him grow as a performer. Do you have any thoughts on kind of letter grade range for this? What would you give it?
I'd give it, I feel like a B. Like I think I'd bump it up from a B minus just based on a few things, but I did overall. I left it feeling good, both about like what the film was trying to say, but also I wasn't miserable watching it, which is not always what happens. So.
For sure. Yeah. This is, I would agree. Yeah. Not miserable. I left it feeling more heartwarmed than anything else. So yeah. So that's a kind of B minus ish, C plus for me, a solid B for Kimber. And if you want to check out Palmer, you can find it streaming on Apple TV Plus. So that is going to do it for us. Those are the reviews that we wanted to cover this week. And so you can join John and Will and I next week for the full gamut of reviews, Sundance thoughts, and everything else. And if you would like, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or Stitcher. You can also check us out on Facebook and Twitter, or if you would like to get in touch with us and leave a comment, you can email us at cinemaholics.podcast@gmail.com. Kimber, thank you so much for joining me this week. It's been fun to kind of get to actually interact in real time with somebody whose work I've enjoyed reading and interacting with in other areas. So this was super fun.
Thank you. Right back at you. It was lovely to meet you and to put a voice with the words.
All right. So from the internet, Kansas City, I am Abby Olchesi. And go ahead. Sorry.
It's okay. And from the internet, New York, I'm Kimber Myers.
Thanks for joining us. We will see you next week.